Hello, folks. Bela and Mike here. Today, we're going to have a special episode of Sailing the East podcast. I'm going to be doing an interview with Joe Hagan. Joe runs a very interesting business, and we're going to talk about sailing the East Coast and all sorts of sailing things, I imagine. And so it's a little different. Mike is not going to be on this podcast. It's just going to be myself and Joe. And we're going to talk about all sorts of sailing adventures, which is sort of a key to the type of business he has. So welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So Joe reached out to me, sent me an email, and he said, hey, I run this business, and we're thinking of sailing up the East Coast next summer, which would be summer of 2021. And he said, I'd like to talk to you about some, places to go, et cetera. And I said, love to do that, but I think why don't we turn it into a podcast instead of, just talking on the phone or sending emails back and forth. So here we are. So Joe, tell us a little bit about your business, its name, and sort of what you do.
Yeah, so we call it Offshore Adventure Sailing. This is something I started about 2.5 years ago. And the goal is really to give people an opportunity to get experience sailing offshore. Many people sail on inland lakes or along the coast, but would like to get more experience. It's quite an adventure. I had an opportunity to do this 25 or so years ago. It sort of changed my life, and I love sharing the adventure. So this is something fun for me to do.
Well, that's fabulous. I really agree with you because for many, many years I sailed on inland lakes and, coastal cruising, never really venturing very far away from the sight of land, which was a requirement for my wife. I got to be able to see land. And then I went on some couple longer trips with some as crew for individuals who had boats. And, so we did 3 or 4 day passages out in the ocean, et cetera. And for me, what it really did was not only really up to my level of confidence and skill in sailing just in general, but also gave me a great appreciation for even when I'm sailing a coastal, right? It taught me so much that it made me much more comfortable with, hey, if a storm is coming, I know what to do. Et cetera, right? So it sort of really broadened my horizon. So my point is, even if people are not thinking about sailing offshore, I think this is a great thing to do because it really broadens your experience base and makes you a much more competent and confident sailor.
Absolutely. And, you will learn things sailing offshore that are quite a bit different than sailing inland. There are hazards and challenges in near coastal sailing that you won't have offshore, and of course the reverse is true also. So it's hard to get the experience unless you have a friend that invites you to go sailing, which is what happened to me a few decades ago. You can go to the Virgin Islands and charter a boat, but that's not really passage making. They generally prohibit you from sailing overnight. You can't get long distance sailing experience. So, it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
Offshore sailing experience.
Yeah. This is great. I'm a big supporter of people who do the types of things that you do to give people this opportunity. And like I said, even if you don't have any visions of doing long passages yourself, it's just a great thing to do.
Yep.
So what type of vessel do you have?
So I have a Cabo Rico 34, which is a quite small boat actually, but it's a very seaworthy boat. It's been around the world taken by a previous owner, and it's honestly, it's not perfect from a business standpoint, but it's the boat that I have, and I'm emotionally attached to it. as is my wife, and that's important. So yeah, it works.
Yeah, that's
We
great.
like it. Yep.
So if I'm interested in going on one of these trips,
Yeah.
what do I need to know before? What should I know? What do you want me to know before I call you up? What's sort of your criteria so you don't have to tell me no, sorry.
Well, so I like to have a telephone conversation with people that express an interest in sailing with me, just to make sure that they understand what they're getting themselves into, and it gives me a little bit of comfort about them, honestly.
Sure.
Um, most of the people who want to come sailing with me are sailors themselves. This is not always true, but it's typically true. And they want to broaden their experience, and they have an idea what sailing is about. Every now and then, I talk to people who might think this is going to be a romantic or luxurious trip, and I have to explain that this is not sitting on the bow as the sun sets and somebody's serving you champagne. This is all of us on board the vessel working together to get a blue water sailboat from point A to point B. And it really does involve everybody. So you gotta be willing to get in there and get your hands dirty, take a watch, maybe, cook a meal in the galley. You got to understand there's a risk of seasickness. I mean, there's a lot of things that some people get real turned off by, and those are the people that don't want to sail with me, and that's fine.
Yeah. So this is a real participatory experience.
Absolutely. I'm trying to give people experience. It's not a school, although you'll learn a lot. But yeah, the experience, the real thing about learning about and getting experience on a blue water sailboat doing blue water sailing.
Yeah. So do you have a home port where these adventures depart from, or do you kind of sail around and kind of have different places?
Well, I told you, I think I mentioned early on that making money is sort of a secondary objective. Objective number one for me is having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so we travel along. I've kept my boat in New Orleans many years, and I've started and ended the season in New Orleans a few times. But this year, we spent hurricane season on the west coast of Florida at near Fort Myers. And we go where we want to go, where I want to go. And if people would like to join us on legs of that trip, I'm happy to have them.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. And typically, how many people do you take, Joe?
So I never take more than 3 people, counting myself. So that's, 4 people on board, which is enough for a boat that's 37 feet or 34 feet long.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect, because that works out for watches too.
Absolutely.
One of the challenges and one of the lessons that I've learned in the passage making that I've done as crew on various different people's boats and on my own is 4 is a great number because I get plenty of sleep. 3 works. 2 people doesn't work for me. It may work for other people, but for me, it doesn't work.
Well, my wife and I sail the boat by ourselves a lot, and of course we've worked out a way, so it's very comfortable for us too. But that's we know each other, we know our limits, and that sort of thing. But you're right, the watches. I have to be really flexible about watches because I have such a diversity of experience in the people that come aboard. So we'll do watches sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours. We'll do watches that overlap sometimes, where you have, you come on watch when the person before you is still on watch, and the next person comes on while you're still on watch, and we have double person watches sometimes. So, it just depends on what works for the team we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, it's like any adventure. It doesn't matter if it's a sailboat, a sailing voyage, or a mountaineering expedition or whatever. It's the same sort of dynamic. Everybody understands that they're in it together, and you just have to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. when you're doing a passage, you can't get off.
You can't get off. That's right.
You know, whether you enjoy it or not, you're there for a certain period of time, and
that's right.
It's important to understand that. Like you said, this is not a cruise on the Princess Cruise Line, and
right. This is not what you want to do if you want to like propose marriage to someone. This is not where you go.
Did you say that because that somebody once wanted to do that?
No, but I fear that, and I've had people contact me, you know, like send me emails about wanting to take an afternoon sail with their fiance, and I'm like, no.
Right.
This is not. That's wonderful. I wish you the best, but you want something different.
Yeah. So what's your typical trip like, Joe? Is it 3 days, 5 days? What do you typically do?
Generally 6 to 10 days long. And we will cover, you know, we will go from point A to point B. And so we might go, this past year, we had a trip, for example, from the Turks and Caicos to Jamaica. So, you know, that is maybe 350 miles, maybe something like that, down through the Windward Passage. And I'll schedule it for like, I can't remember, but I'll probably schedule it for like 8 days, maybe. Now you can do that passage if conditions are all right in like 3 or 4 days. But of course, conditions aren't always just right. And so I allow enough time in the schedule so that we can, you know, wait for the right weather and the right seas. And, you know, if we want to make a stop, we can work that in. There's no preset itinerary. There's only point A and point B, and how we get there, we just have to work out, you know.
Very nice.
That's part of the adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I that's a question I was going to ask you, because the trips I've been on, nobody had a deadline. So whether it took 4 days to do this trip or whether it took 10 days, it really didn't matter. And, you know, everyone says you can set a time or you can set a location, but you can't set both. But now you have paid crew who probably have an airline flight into someplace. So that means you have to be there. And then at point B, they have a departure flight. So, you know, so you do have some scheduling pressure there on your trips, right?
That's right. And I deal with it by just allowing a very long schedule.
Yeah.
You know, 2 to 3 times as much as is really required if things are perfect.
Yeah, that's wise.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, yeah, I mean, sometimes we have to sit tight for a couple days. Sometimes we arrive too early, but usually in those cases, there are other things to do that are nearby that we can do and explore, and, you know, so that's kind of part of the fun also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I've learned about sailing on the East Coast is every place has something wonderful about it.
Yeah.
Every place I've stopped has something marvelous and wonderful. So what trips do you have planned for the summer of 2021?
So our season usually runs from like the 1st of November until the 1st of May, because we've been in the tropics, right? So we've been in the Gulf of Mexico. We've gone down through the Bahamas, down to the Western Caribbean, Jamaica, Honduras, Guatemala, Belize, Mexico, places like that. But this year, COVID substantially complicates things. And so we will be going up the U.S. East Coast. It avoids the hassles. I mean, many countries are closed, or they have quite onerous requirements to get in. And of course, the pandemic right now is kind of terrible.
Right. It's out of control right now as we record this on December 31st, the last day of 2020.
Yeah. Thank goodness it's about over. So we'll be going up the East Coast. I don't have any openings, any passages open to paying crew until April. And that will be from Beaufort, North Carolina to Annapolis. And then in May, I have a trip from Norfolk, Virginia to Newport, Rhode Island. And both of those are maybe 8-day trips or something like that scheduled.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. So, and my wife sails with me when I don't have guests, which is wonderful. And so we'll be exploring sort of as we go. So I'm excited about it. We hope to reach Maine in June. I haven't posted it on the website, but I'd love to go to Nova Scotia, maybe even Newfoundland. But that's still in the dream stage.
Yeah. I've been to Nova Scotia. I highly recommend it. It was.
Did you you went to Halifax?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was Halifax.
I would love to get there. Lunenburg. It's supposed to be a great place.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a great place, and I highly recommend it. The people are super friendly, really nice. We went. I flew in to Halifax, and we went from Halifax. I'm just looking on the map here. We went to a little town and hung out there for a few days. It wasn't Lunenburg. It was further down the coast, and
further to the southwest.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm drawing a blank on the name, and but boy, I'll tell you what a great trip that was. Shelburne. We went to Shelburne.
And so and what time of year was this?
This was in the fall. So so the trip was Halifax to Annapolis.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was warm weather in Halifax and in Shelburne. We just spent one night. I just spent one night in Halifax. Then we made an overnight passage to Shelburne, which was just a great little town. Just beautiful. We spent a couple days there, and then we went from there all the way. We did nonstop there, from there to Newport, basically.
Oh wow!
And it was
Newport, Rhode Island.
Yes, and it was cold.
So you went through the canal there?
We did. We went through the Cape Cod Canal. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that wasn't that upwind?
No, we waited for a weather window.
Okay.
Right?
You had like a north wind or something?
We had we started with a north west wind for the whole trip. Although the first night, I remember this clearly because it was my roughest passage. The seas were still heavy from a previous 3-day blow from the east, right?
Yeah.
So you get
the seas were confused.
The seas were, and I was confused too.
Yeah.
And this was on an Amel 52 Super Marimoon,
nice.
so a beautiful boat. And but I didn't sleep that first night, and then after that the seas kind of calmed down, and we had just a marvelous passage, through the Cape Cod Canal. So that was a great trip. So any questions that I can ask you, or places that you're thinking of, or whatever? That's our initial purpose of this call. So fire away.
So as I mentioned, we're headed to up to Maine.
Yeah.
And I am. My wife's never even been to the state of Maine. I've been there many times, but only on land. And I'm excited about getting there. Maybe going on to Nova Scotia, or even further. But then the question becomes, well, what do you do in the fall? And where do we go? And are we going to leave the boat up in the north? I don't think she's ever been prepped for a winter in the north.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different.
You betcha. That's
something new for us. I mean, we have to winterize our boats in Nashville, but we got to do a lot more than that up in Nova Scotia or Maine. Or can we bring it back? Can you go? Maybe we go to Bermuda. I mean, what are the options from up there?
Well, I think from Nova Scotia or Maine. So we left, if I remember correctly, early September.
Okay.
And it was the weather was warm in Nova Scotia when we were on land. That first night, that first passage, it took us 2.5 days, I think, from Shelburne to Newport, and at night it was chilly. I had all my clothes on, but once we got down to Newport, it was fine, right? And then we went through New York City, which if you haven't done that, you got to do that.
Yeah. So you went through Long Island Sound and down through Hell's Gate.
That's
down
correct.
The East River. Yeah.
That's correct. You just have. I mean, it's one of those trips that you just have to do, And I've been to New York City tons of times, but seeing it from the water and sailing past the Statue of Liberty and under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, etc.
Yeah.
And if you're doing this with your wife, see, one of the beautiful things that I think about the East Coast is, except for a couple of places, you can do everything in 2-hour chunks, or you can do the whole thing nonstop and everything in between, right? Because there's so many harbors and so many places to pull off that you can do that. And to me, that's the beauty of it, right? So if you could only sail for 4 hours this one day because bad weather's coming, that's fine. You can find a nice anchorage or a marina and pull in there, spend a day, and then move on.
Well, that's the thing my wife and I talk about. I mean, we could spend a lifetime on the East Coast, but we've only got, we're trying to get to Maine by June. I mean, we're going to be flying. We're going to be missing so many things.
Yeah.
So, but that's okay. We got next year and the year after that and the year after that.
Right. So I think, one of the things to think about is the person I crewed for. So him and his wife left Annapolis. And they took, I think it was 6 weeks to get up to Nova Scotia, right?
Okay.
Just sort of hopping along the way, right? Hopping along the way. And then it was getting to the end of the season. They wanted to get the boat back, and we brought the boat back much more direct, right? So we went, Shelburne direct to Newport, then Newport down to Sandy Hook, New Jersey, which is just south of New York City. And then from there, nonstop to Annapolis, up the Delaware and through the canal.
Yeah, or you went up the Delaware Bay.
Yeah, it's shorter. That if you're going to Annapolis from the north, it's shorter. It's shorter to go that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so we did that. We just had one night at anchor at one night at Newport and then one night at Sandy Hook. So
how long did it take you to do that trip?
Oh, geez, I'm gonna say 7 or 8 days, something like that.
Yeah. So that's fast.
Yeah, it was pretty fast. So my point is, you can do one leg of it slow,
right,
and do the return leg fast,
right,
and that's you can get crew for that, right? If you want to keep going. Yeah. The part that's I found to be not conducive to stopping is the coast of New Jersey. So it's like the Delmar Peninsula, right? It's like the Delaware there. The coast of New Jersey, basically for a sailboat, you have one place, and that's Atlantic City.
Okay.
Because
I always think of going past Cape May and coming in at Sandy Hook and nothing in between.
Right. So you can stop in Atlantic City. It's a well-maintained entrance, and the tidal currents are not too bad. You got to watch the wind and tide, of course, the wind and current. But I think Cape May to Sandy Hook is 120 miles or something like that. So it's a 24-hour trip. It's an overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that caught my attention about your podcast was you did an episode about, I think it's Wickford. Is that the name?
Yes, Wickford. Yep.
Wickford. And, I am hoping to, Narragansett Bay, of course, is, mythical almost. And I have never been on Narragansett Bay. I've been to Providence on business, but
Sure.
that's not the same thing. So, and of course, Block Island is 30 miles offshore or something like that.
Yep.
I mean, what's that like? Is it as great as everybody says?
So I keep my boat on Narragansett Bay. So I'm up at the north end of Narragansett Bay. My son lives up that way, and we keep it there. So yes, I think it's you could spend the whole summer on Narragansett Bay, right? Just like you could spend the whole summer in the Chesapeake.
Sure.
The nice thing is Narragansett Bay is not as hot and humid as the Chesapeake.
Yeah, right.
Right, because the Chesapeake can get pretty bad. The other interesting thing about the Narragansett Bay is almost every afternoon you get a great sea breeze.
Ah.
Right? So almost every afternoon. And it's just, there's just little towns all over the place, like Wickford.
Yeah.
Right? There's lots of marinas. Anchorages are not as... It doesn't have as many anchorages as the Chesapeake does, right? So the Chesapeake Bay is just full of all these little nooks and crannies that have good holding. It's mud, and you can spend the night there. Narragansett is a little more challenging to find, anchorages to pull into. Part of it is because that whole part of the country is so populated that any good anchorage has a marina in it. Right? Or it's got private moorings in it. So that part's a little challenge, but you can put the trip together. But yes, I would highly recommend spending time up there. Of course, Newport's great. It's just a great town. It's go through, but
I don't know it.
Yeah, it's a great harbor town. It's sort of like Annapolis. Have you ever been to Annapolis?
Yeah, but again, not by water.
Yeah. So it's great. There's a lot of marinas there. I don't know, to tell you the truth, if there's an anchorage there or not. My guess is there might be, but it might be right on the edge of a mooring field, right? So,
I mean, what we would probably do is come in to Narragansett Bay, find a marina somewhere, and stay a few days and tour around and see the towns, and then head on.
Yeah.
Towards Boston.
Yeah. So there is a good anchorage called Dutch Island. Or Dutch Harbor, excuse me. So Dutch Harbor, which you can find on the charts, is a nice anchorage. The challenge is it's not easy to get there. It's not easy to get to Newport from there, because there's an island and a bridge between you and Newport. Right?
I see. Okay.
So if you want to hang out if you want to go to Newport, right, you got to pretty much anchor or get a marina in Newport someplace. But if you want to have sort of an anchorage where you can go explore other places, Dutch Harbor's a nice place.
Yeah.
It's a good anchorage, pretty well protected.
I'm hoping to reach Newport about the 3rd or 4th week of May.
Yes.
That's pretty good weather, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You're good.
Okay.
I mean, you got to bring long sleeves. You got to bring...
Sure.
Your jacket. Your foulies are usually pretty warm, so that's that's my winter coat on the boat.
Yeah.
So
I've had winters where I hardly hadn't put on shoes, in the tropics.
Yeah.
Or sandals only,
Yeah, but May is sort of that's when the sailing season starts kicking off up here, and of course, as you mentioned, going to Block Island. Is fabulous, and then there's in addition to Block Island, there's Martha's Vineyard, there's Nantucket. There's a bunch of those islands in through there that are really, again, they're classical places to stop, right?
Right. There's just so much to do.
Yeah, and if you go through New York City, and you come up, excuse me, if you come up through Long Island Sound. The anchorages there are just tremendous.
Right.
They're just There's lots of them, a lot of places to stop. The scenery is pretty darn good most of the time. It's not. My point is, it's not industrial. Like I've been to Baltimore, right? And Baltimore's sort of industrial. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful,
Right.
but it's sort of industrial. But you go to Long Island and North Shore, and it's mansions and real nice homes. It's like going to Block Island. It's very nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Should be great.
Yeah, and we went through the Cape Cod Canal, which
Yeah.
cuts off several hundred miles.
Yeah, they're going around Cape Cod, I guess. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you go through any narrow piece of water, you got to think about tidal currents. So you got to time it
Yeah.
the right way, particularly us sailboat folks,
Sure.
and particularly the East River. So the one thing I will
Yeah.
tell you about going through the East River in New York City, I would not go through there at night. It is freaking busy. There are
Yeah.
ferries and
Tour
tugboats
boats,
and
ferries,
barges,
yeah.
and helicopters flying around. It's just
Yeah.
you got to be on your game there, right? So,
Right.
And you don't want to be fighting the current, certainly. So,
Right.
you that going through the East River and all of New York Harbor is, I found it to be a challenge, just because
Yeah.
it's almost the best way to describe it is like sensory overload, right?
Yeah.
Because they're
Right.
just
Well, I mean, anybody who's ever been to Manhattan understands sensory overload.
Yeah. I mean, just the opposite of being 100 miles offshore, where there's like
Right.
nothing going on sensory wise.
Right.
Right? This is just the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to. I've never sailed north of the Chesapeake, so this should be an adventure. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it will be an adventure. I think it's fabulous. I think you'll love it. And so when you've come up, have you come up the ICW, or do you typically come up outside?
I have I've done both, but most has been outside. So I did a trip southbound from Georgetown, South Carolina, down around Florida and back up the Gulf. So, and that was almost all offshore.
Yeah.
Seems like we ducked in a couple of nights because of weather or something into the ICW, but generally we were in a hurry and we just wanted to make time, and we were going.
Yeah.
And then I've really not sailed north of there, except for I spent a week in the Chesapeake on a friend's boat down in the southern Chesapeake, Deltaville,
Yes.
and the Norfolk area. There's another town there. I can't recall.
Solomon's is down there. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was fun. That was in the summertime, so the conditions were, certainly benign, except for maybe sea nettles and insects, but not. The seas were benign. The
Yes.
weather was benign.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've always gone in to Pimlico Sound, right? So I usually go in at Beaufort and go up Pimlico and then pop back out someplace, just to sort of avoid the whole, Hatteras, Diamond Shoals, the so-called graveyard of the Atlantic.
Yeah. I'm hoping that in April that will not be a bad passage to do.
Yeah.
I'd like to go on the outside around Cape Hatteras from Beaufort.
Yeah. I think it would be nice, and I guess I've never done it, but I guess the challenge is sometimes the Gulf Stream comes in really close there.
Yeah.
So you got to get the wind from the right direction.
Right, and of course the combination of just the shape of that cape and the Gulf Stream, the weather gets really kind of screwy right there.
Yep.
So you got to be really attentive. You got to, understand what you're getting yourself into.
Right.
But, we'll see. Probably have to go south a bit before turning back to the north. But
yeah.
We'll see.
Well, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So, are there any other things that I can share with you here while we're on this podcast call?
Oh, what if there's one place you think that we should definitely not miss? Have you got one like that?
Oh gosh. Well, I think I would definitely go through New York City.
Yeah.
Right. I think
yeah.
if at least on one of the trips, either going up or coming back.
Maybe the trip back. Right.
I would definitely go through New York City.
I can't do that as a commercial trip because of the certification I have on the boat, but I can do it recreationally with my wife. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely go through New York City. If I remember correctly, we stopped in Port Washington, which is on the north shore of Long Island.
Right.
And that's a great sort of staging area to go through the East River, so you can get the tides correct and the timing.
Right.
And so we went from Port Washington to Sandy Hook, and we did that sort of in one day. That's very doable, given the currents and stuff, right? And then from there we zipped all the way down to Annapolis.
I guess you did that on ebb tide, right? Probably came through Hell's Gate at slack water and and ebb tide. Yeah.
Yep. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was still, a lot of traffic, a lot of boats, a lot of chop because all these big ferries, those things go fast, right? So all of these vessels there are leaving big wakes, and you're bouncing around pretty good. And like I said, we're in a 52-foot Mel, so I never felt so small before.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, the ocean makes any boat feel small. So I guess New York City does the same thing.
Yeah. Super.
So, yeah.
Well, if you're coming up to Newport, coming up this way, like I said, I keep my boat north of Newport, and maybe we could grab a drink or a cup of coffee or a dinner or something like that if the timing works out, Joe. That'd be wonderful.
That'd be great. I'll stay in touch.
Yeah, very good. Hey, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for sharing your adventures with us. And again, tell us the name of the website so if people want to go with you on a trip, they can find it.
Yep, www.offshoreadventuresailing.com.
All right, excellent. So, and like I said earlier, I highly recommend it for anybody who wants to sort of broaden their experience base, and it just makes you a better sailor and seaman all around. It's really,
and it's fun,
and it's fun, right? And it's fun.
You won't forget about it. You'll have stories to tell,
and the stories usually get embellished as time goes on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the size of the waves kind of goes up by at least a foot every year, as I find.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, Joe. Yeah. Thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Bela. I appreciate it.